What a year 2010 has been for Tasmanian politics. A Labor-Green minority government appears to be travelling smoothly, while a historic first step has been made towards ending the decades-long conflict over forestry. But it's early days, and as the latest polling shows, Liberal leader Will Hodgman is still preferred Premier. For our final program of the year, the three party leaders joined me in the studio earlier this week. David Bartlett, Nick McKim, Will Hodgman, thank you very much for coming in to Stateline, all three of you, this fascinating new paradigm that we're all living in. First question to you, Nick McKim. Do you support a pulp mill of any sort in the Tamar Valley?
Well, Ellie, what we've said very clearly is that we don't support the current proposal that's on the books, and I think that's very well known. In relation to any future proposal for a pulp mill, what we've said is that we'll be happy to have a look at that on a case-by-case basis, but I really think a very good case would have to be made for a pulp mill anywhere in the Tamar Valley in future.
David Bartlett, do you believe it will be built?
Well, me and my Labor colleagues hope it will be built because we believe that it will bring certainty for contractors, it will bring high-value downstream processing from a plantation base. So we hope it will be built, but ultimately I think that rests with the company and their finance.
Well, Hodgman, do you believe it will eventually, I mean, we've been talking about this for 7+ years now, will get built?
Yeah, look, I certainly am very hopeful that it will. This is a very, very important capital infrastructure project in this state at a time when some commentators are saying we're entering a recessionary period. Tasmania needs this sort of project.
Well, Hodgman, why are you doing your best then to dismantle the forest peace deal?
Look, certainly reject the assertion that we're doing anything to disrupt the process. The process is occurring, but I have to say there are significant elements of the forest industry and those connected with it and those who live in regional communities who feel that they've been alienated in the process, that they've not been heard. We remain very confident that there will be, from this process, an opportunity for the forest industry to restructure, to have a look at itself, to explore new opportunities, but we will not ascribe our support to a set of principles that in our view is flawed.
David Bartlett, you appeared to acknowledge the peace deal could in fact be contradictory, that maybe not in fact doable because of it commits to an end to large-scale native forest logging, and on the other hand also commits to contracts, going out some 17 years.
Yeah. I said this at a public forum just this week, in fact, that we don't know if the principles can be implemented in full. That's why we, as a Cabinet, have set up a process and proposed that to the federal government and the stakeholders that engages all 10 signatories plus an expert panel to look at the data, to look at the evidence and to advise government on how the implementation, and I do say, and I've said clearly, if the implementation in full of those principles can occur.
Nick McKim, you went into the state election campaign very strongly campaigning on the spiralling cost of living,
yes,
the cost of living for Tasmanians. But since you've been in government with Labor, the costs have continued to go up, particularly utilities. I mean, electricity, 26%. Yeah. When will you succeed in bringing them down?
Well, I think we're in the process of putting in place the building blocks for that, Airlie. As part of the budget negotiation process, we have delivered a cost of living strategy that the Social Inclusion Commissioner is currently working on, and there'll be some interim reporting of that earlier next year. We've established an electricity supply side panel to have a look at how the energy and particularly the electricity generation industry...
Lots of reviews. When do you expect results?
What you don't do in this situation is make up policy on the run. We are determined to play a constructive role in government. That's why 2 Green MPs, with the support of our party room, have accepted the Premier's invitation to sit in Cabinet. We want to work constructively. We want to be part of a good, true policy generation process. And ultimately, on electricity power prices, earlier, the Auditor General's report yesterday exposed the Liberals as voting earlier in Parliament only a month ago for higher power prices in the long term. Now, ultimately, that's what policy on the run risks.
Not policy on the run, it was a policy that your Labor colleagues took to the state election.
Well, Airlie, just let's be really clear about this. Labor took a policy to the state election and then backed down from it. The Liberals ridiculed it before the election and then pretended they'd adopted it later. We had a consistent position all the way through. We thought it was poor policy before the election. We thought it was poor policy after the election, and that's consistency in politics for you.
How do you explain voting against your own policy when we had a debate in Parliament? The Greens members actually voted against our policy to introduce new concessions to reduce the impact of power prices.
Airlie,
Why
just
was that?
A little bit of honesty in this debate. What has occurred around concessions is that matters were referred to the Social Inclusion Commissioner for assessment and inclusion in the cost of living strategy, and Will well knows that.
In terms, as Greens leader, are you happy for the mums and dads, for battlers to be paying for big industrials who often pay less for their power, for their electricity, than it in fact costs to produce it?
Look, this is a complex issue, Airlie, and certainly there are some major industrials in
It's a complex issue, but on the surface, do you agree with that?
Well, it is a complex issue, as I said, because there is a lot of employment generated around the major industrials in this state.
Can I just say that the premise of the question is not entirely correct, because as these contracts are coming up for renewal, Hydro, as part of the national electricity market, is in fact negotiating on commercial terms. And as part of the national electricity market, of course, these businesses can go elsewhere to buy their power as well.
So they won't be able to pay less than it costs to produce?
What I'm saying is that Hydro is negotiating these contracts as they come up on commercial terms.
Fairly importantly, this might not be a decision that's government's to make. We need to understand the implications of a major industrial at some stage in the future deciding to go elsewhere. Some of the plant and equipment at some of the major industrials in Tasmania is quite old. They do find it difficult to compete on global markets, and we need to understand not only not only what the challenges might be, but what the opportunities for Tasmania might be if one of those major industrials does decide to leave at some stage in the future. And one of those opportunities might be lower power prices.
What's your position, Will Hodgman?
Well, for a start, I think it's absolutely critical that we do what we can to ensure that we keep business and investment here in Tasmania and to attract it. And we need to ensure within the commercial framework that major industrials are operating, as the Premier has said, that we are providing companies with a good opportunity to stay in this state, because they are major employers. They generate significant revenues to the state.
Do you know what they pay for their power?
Well, I must say there's a lot of questions or a lot of statements have been made about exactly what they pay. We visit them regularly and often ask them, and they don't tell us. But that's not to say that they don't believe that they're paying a reasonable and fair price, and we'll often point to other jurisdictions as a comparison. I think as much as we can, there needs to be some degree of transparency without compromising commercial discussions, and we are talking about a commercial arrangement here.
David Bartlett, you recently said that minority government was likely to be the norm for the next decade. Is this Labor Green government going to last the distance?
I absolutely am confident that this Labor Green cabinet, with members of both Labor Party and Greens in it, will go the full 4 years. I'm absolutely certain of that. Now, as to what future constituencies deliver to the Tasmanian Parliament, I wouldn't be quite so bold as to predict, but what I would say, in a 35-seat Parliament, it is likely that we will have regular minority governments, and therefore we had better grow up and work out how to make them work, because the alternative is diabolical for Tasmania.
Nick McKim, David Bartlett spoke for you then. Do you believe that you'll last the distance?
I'd never pretend to speak for me.
No, I'm not sure that you can speak for me, Ellie. I am confident this government will last the distance, notwithstanding Will and his party's attempts to drag it down, and I understand why the Liberals are doing that, but I am confident that this government will go the full distance. And from our point of view, Ellie, we committed during the election campaign to deliver stability in the event that the Tasmanian people chose a power-sharing parliament. That's what we've done.
Well, Hodgman, you never thought it would work. In fact, you called it perverse and unworkable. These two here now seem to be the best of mates. It does appear to be working. Do you believe it can go full term?
Oh, look, I make no prediction as to what may or may not happen, and we're expecting and planning for a full term as an effective opposition, and it's our job to hold the government to account. We're not paid to sit by and just applaud whatever they do. We've got a responsibility, a very important one, and notwithstanding the new paradigm, our political system works best where there's a competition of ideas, where there is critical scrutiny of government operations, and where we can play a part in representing those who feel their voices aren't being heard. And that's what we're committed to doing.
Can I just say, I don't have a squabble with anything that Will's just said then, but what I would say is that if we are to take Tasmania to a place, a paradigm, or whatever word we want to use, that is the politics of ideas, that ideas are the most important thing in politics and the execution of those ideas, then we have to shed the politics of fear. And that goes for all three parties, not just us and not just the Liberals, but also the Greens. The politics of fear needs to be shed, because if we can do that, and if we can have elections run not on fear but on ideas and people's ability to execute those ideas, we'll have better outcomes for decades to come.
You've been talking about, getting rid of the politics of fear and cooperative politics. What are we going to see coming into the next election campaign? Are you two going to be out there campaigning together?
No, well, no doubt. No doubt all three of us, Ellie, will be proudly campaigning for the political parties we represent, and I don't think we should apologise for that. What I hope is that we don't see some of the negative smear campaigning that we've seen in the past, or if we do see it, it just won't simply be effective, because people will understand that it is based on fear and it is based on negativity, and we've demonstrated and will demonstrate over this term of government that we can work constructively and cooperatively to deliver good government.
So I can assume from that then that we're not going to see what we saw just 9 months ago, where the Labor Party under David's leadership were using robocalls and brochures to claim that the Greens wanted to legalise heroin, or indeed misrepresenting a number of our policies. Is that going to stop at the next election? Is Labor committing to that?
With me as leader, absolutely, because what I aspire to as part of this job and what we've taken on here is to prove to Tasmanians that whatever they throw at us at any election, we can make work. But at the next election, I'll be saying to people that we're running for the most amount of seats possible, majority if possible, but that if you don't deliver that for us as voters, we will be the party of maturity, of responsibility and cooperation to make things work. We need to focus on, rather than our differences becoming a shouting match, our differences politically becoming an opportunity to think about how we can do things better. And we've done that already this year. We've done it in education. We've done it in energy. I believe we're doing it in forestry and trees.
It's very early days,
it's
though.
Early days.
You've said it's the start.
It's early days.
Is the friendship going to be tested?
It's not about friendship. It's about...
Oh, well, it's a political arrangement, political agreement, whatever. Call it what you will.
Well,
is it likely to be tested? Or isn't it likely to be tested?
I'm not fussed at what it's called. It's being tested. Let's think about Tasmania tomorrow. Now, I'm deeply passionate about this reform. But what we have managed to do, because Labor and the Greens had a different policy going to the election, is, I believe, through a negotiated, mature and responsible process, take the best bits of each policy and to create where our differences normally would have descended into a slanging match, our differences have produced a better outcome.
Thank you all very much for coming in. David Bartlett, Nick McKim, Will Hodgman.
Thanks,
Hopefully we'll see you in the new year.
Sure you will.
Good on you.